Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I trust and hope that you are all well. Please remember tomorrow's special announcement about the Patreon switchover from memberships on YouTube over to the Patreon platform. You can find all of the information under the Community tab on the Back to Ashes main page, as the instructions will be way too long to put into the introduction of a video. So please head over there and you'll find all of the information that you are looking for. With that being said, it is time to go back to ashes, for when we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and happier person in the morning. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for this dose of vocal melatonin entitled Unsolved Mysteries, Vol.3. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first case, there will be an ad, and afterwards there will be no more ads placed within the video. Warning: some of these cases involve material not suitable for all. Listening discretion is advised. Austrian-born woman who later moved to France murdered near the Grand Canyon. Who is she? In October 2003, the decomposing body of a 55 to 65-year-old woman was found near a popular entrance to Grand Canyon National Park. Estimated birth year 1938 to 1948. She had died of blunt force trauma to the head between a few days and 2 weeks earlier, placing her death in early to mid-October of 2003. She had extensive dental work worth thousands of dollars, and forensic tests indicate that she spent her early years in Austria before living in France later in life. She clearly cared about the appearance of her nails and hair, and the report mentions that her nails were beautifully manicured. There were indications that she had eaten just hours before her death. I didn't see any information on what kind of food it was, so I don't know if she had eaten at home or at a restaurant on the drive into the area. If she had moved to the area, she would have to live within a couple of hours of Devil Dog Road in Williams, Arizona. That opens up a lot to Arizona towns that are popular retirement destinations. It's also highly likely that she was a tourist who didn't live in the area. If she was a tourist, was she still living in France, or had she retired to the United States or another country? This murder investigation is still ongoing. Jennifer Lee Martin. Jennifer Lee Martin was 11 years old when she went missing on June 28, 1987, in Lemon Valley, Nevada, just outside of Reno, around 3 p.m. At 215 Surge Street, there is a trailer park where Jennifer resided, and that happened to be right next to a 7-Eleven on Lemon Valley Drive at the time of her disappearance, now since vacant. Her brother Charles, 19 years old at the time, gave Jennifer some money to buy him a pack of Coca-Cola and something for herself. She left barefoot, as most kids around there did, and also was wearing a gray-purple sweatshirt dress. The walk should have taken her less than 5 minutes, according to her family. When she didn't return within 20 minutes, her brother, now worried, went out to look for her. The store clerk, D. Fumiller, had told Charles that Jennifer had stopped by and left the store in the direction of the trailer park, but was never seen again. Witnesses state there was a light-colored Toyota Corolla in the area of the time of her disappearance, but police could never figure out who it belonged to. Other witnesses account to have seen Jennifer at the entrance of the trailer park. Jennifer has a coffee-stained birthmark on her right hip, white bumps on her back that are also birthmarks, a star-shaped scar on her right upper arm, and 2 small hairline scars on the underside of her chin. If you know anyone who was in the area or anyone that knows something, please contact the Washoe County Sheriff's Office at 775-328-3001. According to an old newspaper clipping, witnesses also stated that Jennifer was possibly seen in Hawthorne, Nevada, which is 130 miles outside of Lemon Valley, Nevada. But the detective said those tips never panned out. What happened to 20-year-old Sabrina Kaler of Erie, Pennsylvania? Sabrina Kaler disappeared on June 24, 2002, while at a swimming hole with a friend. She was mentally challenged, and at the time she vanished, had a mental capacity of a 14-year-old. She graduated from East High School in 2001. She was seen in Eagley Park, a swimming hole in western Erie County. She was currently in the company of David Sherman Heck, a friend of her boyfriend. She was 20 years old. As Sabrina and Heck were enjoying their swim, there was allegedly a confrontation with Heck's ex-girlfriend. They retreated to the Tasty Twist ice cream stand, where they then called a police officer. A state trooper later accompanied them back to Eagley Park, where Heck gave his ex-girlfriend back a pair of pants that allegedly belonged to her. The pair left the park again. Later that day, they may have been seen on Old Albion Road in Springfield Township. This sighting has not been confirmed. Heck claimed to police that he dropped her off at a local theater and gave her money to see Lilo and Stitch. He is considered a suspect in her disappearance, and people do not believe his story. After she disappeared, he was incarcerated on burglary charges. She was declared legally dead in 2009. Her remains have never been uncovered. In the spring of 1981, a young woman returned home to her apartment after a night out clubbing. The following Monday, her landlord finds her body stabbed to death. Who killed Linda O'Day? Linda O'Day was a 25-year-old, though some sources list her as 28, white female who was found stabbed to death on Monday, June 1, 1981, by her landlord in her apartment in Newcastle, Delaware. Her apartment was in a converted 2.5-story house. Linda was a lifelong resident of Newcastle who had 3 sisters and 3 stepsisters. Described as quiet and hardworking, Linda worked at the state mental health hospital as a secretary and a cashier at the McDonald's on Route 13. She was last seen alive on Saturday, May 30th, around 1:30 a.m. by her friend and the friend's boyfriend after a night of nightclubbing. Her body was found at 2 p.m. on the following Monday, after a tenant living upstairs from her noticed that she hadn't picked up her mail. They went to drop her mail off at the front of her door, and upon noticing the door ajar and a foul odor, immediately went to the landlord, who entered into her apartment and found her body on the floor of her bedroom. She was partially clothed and was found stabbed to death. The position of her body, as well as her nightgown being pulled up to around her neck, suggested sexual assault. Linda was killed by a steak knife from her own kitchen. Curiously, they found additional steak knives in Linda's laundry basket, in addition to the one that was found in her body. There was vomit on either side of her bed that could not be explained. Forensic examiners believed that the area around Linda's body was cleaned, as there was little blood around her, but there was blood underneath her. They did take a piece of pipe beneath her sink, but couldn't find evidence of blood in the pipe. It looks as though Linda's face was covered by her pillow by the killer, which in my opinion is an interesting detail. It can be inferred that the FBI has considered Henry Lee Lucas as they requested evidence from her case as seen in the Henry Lee Lucas FBI documents. But hair fiber matching tests were inconclusive. Henry Lee Lucas did live in the region at the time of her murder and is notorious for confessing to murders he did not actually commit. My general theory on her case is that she was getting stalked by either a customer at the McDonald's she worked at or a patient at the mental health facility she worked at who became fixated on her. This case is still ongoing. Marissa, an intellectually disabled young woman who was murdered, sexually assaulted, and then thrown into the sea. The woman, who had the IQ of a 5-year-old due to an accident when she was a child, left her parents' house on the morning of September 9, 2003, and went to her sister's home, Dolores, 2 streets away. Dolores gave €2, with which Marissa said she was going to have a coffee and buy a once coupon, which she did a short time later in the small square of Las Ramblas, in the center of the village. The last time she was seen alive, she was walking along the street known as Calle Estreta. From there, the trail was lost until her body was found in the sea 2 days later. Maria's body, who at the time was 37 years old and mentally disabled, appeared 2 days later on September 11, 2003, floating in the water off the coast of Las Aguilas. A neighbor passing by the sea saw how the tide was rocking the half-naked body of a person and did not hesitate to jump into the sea to rescue her. When all the neighbors were convinced that they were dealing with a fatal accident, a slip and fall, the coroner informed the Guardia Civil of the shocking results of an initial emergency examination of the body. Her clavicle and jaw had been broken, and she had numerous bruises all over her head and body. From then on, the hypothesis of murder was the only one used by the investigators. The results of the autopsy did not take long to support the thesis of a violent death. The forensic experts of the National Institute of Toxicology of the Canary Islands determined that the body, which was found without trousers and without underwear, had been in the water for some 36 hours. The professional efforts of the specialists even determined that Marissa Hernandez had been run over from behind by a car. Then, her jaw and arm were broken, probably in an attempt to stop the victim's resistance. Afterwards, Marissa was sexually assaulted, probably by more than one person, and finally thrown into the sea, while she still had a breath of life. The time the body remained in the water allied itself with the criminals, erasing all traces of their DNA. The case was complicated. Even so, the Guardia Civil arrested a suspect, who was eventually released due to the lack of evidence. There has been no news about this case since 2013, when the Spanish online paper El Dia wrote an article about the neglect on this case. East River Jane Doe, or Hudson River Jane Doe, May 2000. On May 6, 2000, the body of an adolescent female was pulled from the East River by a FDNY boat at the 60th Street heliport. The 12 to 18-year-old Doe was measured at 5 feet 6 inches tall, and her weight was estimated at around 150 pounds. Cause of death was undetermined. as her body was estimated to have been in the water for 6 months to a year. The doe was in an advanced state of decomposition, which introduces room for error. Hair and eye color could only be estimated. The reconstruction created depicts a girl with shoulder-length brown hair and almond-shaped black or very dark brown eyes, with the caveat that features such as nose, size of lips, eye color, and ears are the estimations of the artist to complete the image and should not be used as a significant marker for identification. Entered into NAMUS as white or Caucasian, the unidentified girl is also reported as having significant amounts of racial admixture, in this case, Hispanic or Native American. The Doe Network lists her as having possibly Hispanic or mixed ancestry. Personally, I would be interested to know if this admixture was discovered through DNA testing, and if DNA testing was carried out, if genetic genealogy could be used for an identification in this case. I would imagine that a body so decomposed to the point that eye color and hair color could only be estimated would require DNA testing to determine ethnic composition. What drew me to this case is the distinctive clothing that the girl was wearing. According to NAMUS, she was wearing a beige, maybe discolored white, t-shirt with red trim and a skunk emblem on the front, and the phrase, "perfect thyroid" on the back. The skunk emblem is the logo for an indie record label, Skunk Jam, and Perfect Thyroid is the name of a band closely associated with Skunk Jam, which performed in the Northeast throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. In addition to the distinctive band shirt, the girl was also wearing a dark blue Champion sports bra, blue paisley boxer shorts, olive drab cargo pants, and light socks. I don't think any shoes were recovered. The clothes are relatively unusual. The Skunk Jam's shirt was not a widely distributed item sold throughout the country, but rather an item that connects the Doe to a specific subculture or musical fandom in a specific place and time. I believe that Perfect Thyroid is aware of the Jane Doe, and that lead hasn't generated any good tips. The shirt, however, does suggest that the girl may have been involved in the skater or raver scenes. The baggy pants and boxer shorts could also indicate those interests, and the sports bra would have been a practical item when engaging in physically demanding activities, like skating or dancing. According to the case file document seen on Reddit subgroup Grateful Doe, it reads, "I have never attended any of their shows, but they were popular with teenagers, and I remember that they often attracted a certain type of kid, whom we would call skaters or alternatives in the 90s. You would actually refer to a kid that way. Oh, she's alternative. It was not uncommon at all for these girls to wear boys' clothes, especially the huge baggy skater jeans and cargo pants. The Jinko brand, if you're familiar with it, was very popular, and they eventually made pants for women that we called girly Jinkos. But lots of girls just wore the boy pants, even the kind with 36-inch leg openings or whatever they were. They were enormous, and plenty of girls wore boxer shorts. It was considered cool to have them showing over the very low waistband of one's huge pants. It's also been posited that the Doe was perhaps a transgender man. The outfit as a whole is androgynous, and the boy's underwear and chest-compressing sports bra could point towards the Doe having lived and presented as a male. She may also have been lesbian or bisexual. A disproportionate number of homeless youth in the United States are LGBTQIA+, and one can imagine that that situation was even worse 20-something odd years ago. If the Jane Doe was homeless and or a runaway, it makes sense that she may never have been reported missing. One question which comes to my mind is if she may have entered the river very far away from where she was recovered. If the body had been in the water for 6 months to a year, it could have drifted down some from some community upstream. Given the body was found in early May, perhaps it could have sunken in the cold, and then when the water warmed, decomp brought it to the surface maybe? Overall, I think that DNA testing is the best way to get a name back for this doe. It's been 23 years, and with the reconstruction being as tentative as it is, I find it unlikely that someone would come forward with critical information at this point, from the ID posters alone. Foul play might not even be a factor in the case if the Jane Doe entered the water due to accident or suicide. Hopefully in the future, the girl in the skunk jam shirt will finally be identified. A cubby house full of blood, but no body has been found to this day. Sydney, John Doe, 2012. Near the end of January 2012, school has resumed for the pupils of Riverwood Primary Public School in Sydney. It started off on a very grim, morbid discovery, however. One of the teachers has found out that inside of a wooden cubby house, for those who don't know, it's a small home that you can put in your garden for kids to play inside, there was a huge blood stain on the floor. Concerned, the school called the police to begin the investigation into what could have happened in that small wooden house in the school's playground. A sample of blood was taken for tests, and it turned out to belong to a male. About 0.4 gallons of blood was found in the cubby house, but there's a chance that there was more outside. But the heavy rains in the early January could have washed it away. The person who was wounded was likely a child or a small adult. Due to how confined the cubby house was, a larger person just wouldn't fit inside. It's highly likely that the victims simply wouldn't be able to stand up on their own after such heavy blood loss, implying that there was a third person present, either a killer or someone who was assisting in whatever has happened inside. The blood appeared there sometime between the 13th and 29th of January. The cubby house was sprayed as a measure of pest control on January 12th, and the man responsible for it said that there were no bloodstains therein. There's a football stadium-sized swamp behind the school that was searched right after the bloodstain was reported, but it seems like nothing was found. Missing person reports were checked and compared, and so were school absentee records, hospital records, but it yielded no results. The police also tried going door from door to find out any more information, but it still ended up in nothing. A DNA profile was being developed, but there's no information if it was completed or if it gave the police any more leads. They were also contacting law enforcement from other countries, but it apparently led to nowhere. The police seems to imply that it was a homicide, but the case isn't classified as such. The cubby house was removed from school grounds because it made students and teachers feel uneasy. School's spokespersons said that it just wasn't nice to keep it, knowing, or assuming, what happened inside. The structure was pulled apart in an effort to find additional clues like hair, fingerprints, or other DNA. But there were no updates since, so it's hard to say if they found anything of use. That's basically all the info there is about this person. I can't find any updates about this case, so it's hard to say if the police have any leads they're working on, or if the case is completely cold. It's unclear if this was a murder or something like injury or suicide, but given that the victim likely wouldn't be able to get up by themselves, there had to be someone else involved, either a murderer or some sort of grim assistant. Whatever has happened, this John Doe is likely dead, but where his body is remains a mystery. There's always a chance that he's somewhere in the swamp and the police have probably missed him. It happens all the time. But if someone else is involved, there's a chance that he was taken to a different place. What an odd choice of spot to kill someone or yourself. I wonder if there's some deeper reason for that. Anyway, this case is really interesting because it's one of the few does who don't really have a body found to speak of, only the giant pool of blood. I would love to know what happened in that cubby and where this man or boy is, to bring him back to his loved ones and give him his name back. What do you think about this case? What do you think transpired there? And was it a murder, an accident, suicide, or do you think it was something else? Karen Beth Kamsch went missing in 1976 and only reported missing 31 years later. What happened to her? Karen was last seen in Pasadena, Maryland, sometime during the winter months of 1976. She was living with her grandmother, Olga Kamsch, in the 50 block of Wishing Rock Road at the time. She was a straight-A student at Brooklyn Park Senior School and had skipped the 6th grade. However, around the time of her disappearance, she had been getting into trouble and had also run away from home several times. It is reported that she may have been abused, but the nature of the abuse and the identity of the abuser or abusers have not been disclosed. She had moved in with her grandmother because she was having problems with her family. Olga told everyone that Karen ran away during the winter of 1976. She said she realized the child was missing when Karen did not arrive at school. She left behind all of her belongings, including her winter coat. Karen has never been heard from again, and there has been no indication of her whereabouts since 1976. In 2007, Karen's younger brother contacted police to inquire as to the status of her case. Olga and Karen's father has said they reported Karen as a missing child in 1976. But investigators have found no record of the report. It is unclear whether the report was never made or whether it was simply misplaced or destroyed in the intervening 3 decades. Olga passed away in 1999, and Karen's aunt and uncle now live in the house on Wishing Rock Road. A new missing persons report was officially filed for Karen on May 15, 2007, and police began interviewing her friends and surviving relatives. Authorities believe foul play may have been involved in Karen's disappearance, as they cannot find any records of her existence after 1976. Her case is being treated as a homicide. Investigators searched Olga and Karen's former home for evidence and sucked 5 feet of debris out of a dried-up well behind the house. They stated they have a person of interest in Karen's disappearance, and this individual is a close associate or relative of hers. The investigation on Karen's disappearance is still ongoing. A Ziploc bag containing fingers of a little girl is found in a dumpster. 2 years later, a skeleton of a girl of similar age is found. Is this the same person? Honolulu, Jane Doe's 2012 and 2014. This is actually 2 cases from Honolulu. On the 1st of February 2012, a female resident shifting through garbage found a plastic Ziploc bag with fingers inside it in a dumpster of Kukui Gardens housing complex in Liliha, Honolulu. From what I've gathered, Kukui Apartments are a complex of about 20 buildings of affordable housing, and people living there rarely move out. There were 6 fingers in total, 2 whole and 4 partial, without thumbs. They were officially classified as fragmentary remains. According to a policeman who was called to assist, the fingers were preserved in some way, and that they didn't smell when the bag was opened. Some sources state that the fingers were skeletonized, but NAMUS says that they had soft tissues and that they didn't look like fingers when the woman found them. The forensic lab that was tasked with testing the fingers said that they were not well preserved and leathery to the touch. According to NAMUS, sighting or seriating the fingers was impossible, and I assume that it means that they couldn't tell what fingers these were and from which hand they came from, left or right. There's also no PMI, so these fingers could have been ancient in theory. What they do know is that they belong to a girl, around 2 to 4 years in age, of unknown ethnicity, though a couple sources state that they could belong to a boy 3 to 5 years of age. Most sources say that it was a girl, however. The woman who found them was ruled out as a suspect. The police have allegedly checked all the ERs for any children that came there with missing fingers, but didn't find anything. Since then, there has been little movement in the case. There is a chance that the victim is actually still alive, so it's unknown if there even is a rest of the body for anyone to find. She could have lost the fingers in an accident or as a result of abuse. It's really impossible to tell with just the fingers. Dating them is also seemingly near impossible, though I'd admit keeping badly preserved fingers of a kid in a Ziploc bag for a prolonged time is rather odd. Let's put that one nicely. There have been theories about the girl losing fingers in an accident, and a parent who couldn't afford medical care amputated them themselves at home. Some also theorize that she might have been trafficked from Guam or the Marshall Islands, but I can't judge on how possible it is. There's also a possibility that the girl has been dead for a long, long time and her fingers were removed in an act of grave robbing. Notably, on the 29th of June 2014, skeletal remains of a girl of unknown race and ethnicity aged 2 to 6 were found in a metal receptacle inside of a box. There's remarkably little info on this case, not a single article, only a NAMUS, a web sleuth's thread, and an unidentified wiki page. It's been speculated that the fingers found before belonged to the girl found in 2014. There's no info on if the skeleton was missing its fingers. Still, similar age, proximity of both sets of remains and same gender, by most accounts, made people think. Who were these little girls? Could they be the same person? I feel like when it comes to islands, it's easier to solve cases like these because arrivals and departures are easier to control and monitor. Is it possible that the first girl is still alive? Does she live in an abusive household, or maybe an incredibly impoverished one that doesn't have money to fund her proper medical help? Are both sets of remains even modern? Or have both girls been dead for decades? What are your thoughts on this ongoing case? Joseph Thomas Rajuis Jr. went missing in 1989. In 1995, he called his sister and claimed to be homeless in Illinois, but the call was traced to Connecticut. What happened to Joseph? This one is kind of all over the place in terms of when he was last seen, last allegedly heard from, and when he was reported missing. According to his sister, Heather, Joseph Thomas Rajuis Jr. was last seen in Newburyport, Massachusetts on May 1, 1989. He was 32 years old at the time of his disappearance, and his sister states he had gone to Methuen, Massachusetts to see a girlfriend. There were possible phone calls that he made to family members up until 1995, with one call saying he was hospitalized in a Massachusetts or Connecticut hospital with a slashed throat, and another was a collect call he made to his sister saying he was in Chicago and homeless. But when that bill came in, it showed the call had been made from Connecticut. He was known to be in Illinois, 1984, Colorado, 1987, Connecticut and Massachusetts, 1989. Joseph stands around 6 foot to 6'2" and was around 240 to 270 pounds at the time of his disappearance. He has a distinctive biker-type style, and in fact, Rajuis claimed to be associated with a motorcycle gang that operated out of Lowell, Massachusetts. The clothing he wore at the time of his disappearance is not known, but he was frequently seen wearing jeans, a t-shirt, a vest, size 12 work boots or cowboy boots, a gold chain necklace, a wallet attached with a chain, and possibly brimmed hats. He is very nearsighted and was known to wear strong prescription gold wire-rimmed aviator-style glasses. He smokes cigarettes, and he may grow his hair long and have a beard and mustache. He is missing his upper 2 front teeth, and he may have a scar on his throat and a surgical scar on his navel. His left ear was pierced and was torn from having the earring forcibly pulled out. He may use the first names Joe, Joey, Peter, and or Petey, or the name Wayne Miller. I was not able to find any information on why he used an alias, but it might relate to a prior arrest history. Rajuich had multiple homemade tattoos. On his left arm, he has tattoos of a cross, the name Joe, followed by the letters FTW, and the letters DFFL, descending down his hand. He has the word FUCK spelled across the fingers of one hand, and the word LOVE or HATE on the fingers of the other hand. He may have the names Kathy or Sally on his torso, and he has other tattoos on his body and right arm. He may have worked for a moving company in Chicago, Illinois for a time, and he had also worked for a sanitation company. He has a prior arrest history. His family reported him missing in 2011, 22 years after they last saw him, and 16 years after they last heard from him. The circumstances of his disappearance are unclear. Unfortunately, his collect call in 1995 that was traced to Connecticut was the last contact his family has ever made with him. Additional info. The Charlie Project says he was last seen in Methuen, but other reports indicate his sister stated she last saw him in Newburyport on the way to Methuen. The Methuen, Massachusetts Police Department is the investigating agency. What happened to Leanna Warner? Chisholm, Minnesota, June 14, 2003. Leanna Susan Marie Warner was born on January 21, 1998, to parents Kayleen Whitaker and Christopher Warner. The family moved to Chisholm, Minnesota, a little over 3 hours driving distance from Minneapolis and St. Paul, a few months before Leanna vanished. On June 14, 2003, a Saturday, Leanna and her mother Kayleen had been to the Side Lake rummage sale and had also visited a lake near their house. When the pair got home sometime in the afternoon, Kayleen wanted Leanna to take a nap because she seemed tired. Leanna did not want to take a nap, telling her mother that she was not tired. Instead, she wanted to go over to a friend's house. This was at around 4:30 p.m. The friend's home was a block and a half from the Warner home. Kayleen finally agreed that Leanna could walk over to the friend's house, but to come home by 5 p.m. Leanna had apparently walked to her friend's house many times. It was a familiar route. However, when Leanna got to the house and knocked on the door, there was no answer. Clearly, her friend wasn't at home, so Leanna decided to head home herself. A witness, presumably a neighbor, saw Leanna, quote, walk down Southwest 2nd Street between 5 to 5:15 p.m., end quote. Although this was a short walk, Leanna never made it home. Kayleen began to worry when Leanna didn't come home by 5 p.m., but waited until 5:30 to begin searching the neighborhood, thinking at first that maybe Leanna lost track of time. Some of the neighbors even began helping Kayleen search, but to no avail. When no trace of Leanna could be found through the neighborhood search, Kayleen called the police between 8:40 and 9 p.m. The police responded right away, coordinating search parties, using bloodhounds to track her scent throughout the small town of Chisholm. Ore mines, garages, sheds, and barns were even searched. At first, police were concerned that Leanna had wandered off and gotten lost. But as time wore on and Leanna wasn't found, police in the Chisholm community began to believe that perhaps Leanna had been kidnapped. About a month after Leanna vanished, a set of children's footprints were found at the lake near the Warner home. This prompted the lake to be drained just in case Leanna had somehow made it there and drowned. But nothing was found that traced back to Leanna. And it was the summertime, so any number of kids could have been at that lake. Around the time Leanna vanished, several strange men were seen in the neighborhood. First was a man in his mid-30s, about 5'10" and 155 pounds. This man had a dark colored tattoo of either a sun or a star on his right arm. The other men seen in the area was an African-American man driving a 2-door maroon and blue Cadillac with a bald and or shaven head, and a white man with curly hair driving a rusty brown older pickup truck. None of these men have been identified or have been conclusively linked to Leanna's case. Another suspect in Leanna's case is a man named Matthew James Curtis, who had been arrested in Chisholm for having inappropriate images of children in August 2003. Because of the nature of the crime, he was questioned in Leanna's case and DNA was taken from Curtis. However, no link could be made between Curtis and Leanna, and Curtis committed suicide in September 2003 before his case went to trial. Police wanted to link Curtis to the case because of the close proximity, being in Chisholm at the time, and because of the charges he was facing. Finally, there was a suspect named Joseph Edward Duncan III, who had written about Leanna's case in his blog. In his blog, Duncan stated that he didn't do anything to Leanna, but he was afraid that the police would pin it on him. Due to these statements and the fact that Duncan seemed to know a lot about the case, he was questioned by the police. Duncan was cleared when it was discovered that he wasn't even in Chisholm when Leanna vanished. In the fall of 2003, Kaylin and Christopher, Leanna's parents, got into a domestic dispute when Kaylin hit Christopher with her car. This was the result of an argument the pair had in a convenience store parking lot. Christopher was only minorly injured and Kayleen was charged with misdemeanors like causing bodily harm. This probably has nothing to do with Leanna's case, but it is worth mentioning. In the weeks leading up to Leanna's disappearance, she had been behaving oddly and making strange comments. One day, Kayleen and Christopher found Leanna playing with a big case and tub of Barbie dolls and accessories that went with them. When asked where they came from, because Kayleen and Christopher had not given or purchased them for their daughter, Leanna replied that a little old lady had given them to her. Leanna had also become afraid that monsters outside her bedroom window were going to come inside and get her. Leanna had begun sleeping in her bedroom closet, prompting Kayleen to become so concerned that she even looked outside the house one night and found nothing. Lastly, about a week before Leanna vanished, she had packed a suitcase filled with her favorite things and proceeded to tell her parents that she was going to live at her new family's house. Now, 5-year-olds say goofy things all the time, but these comments with the mysterious appearance of the Barbies and the packing of the suitcase made police believe that there was something more going on here, that Leanna had been lured away with toys and or scare tactics. At the time when Leanna Warner vanished, she was 5 years old, around 3 foot tall and 48 pounds. Her hair was cut into a bob style with bangs, and she had brown hair and brown eyes. Leanna had been wearing a sleeveless dark blue denim dress with an attached belt, orange Hanes brand underwear, a flower-shaped earring with a red stone in one ear. Leanna was also not wearing any shoes or socks when she vanished. Leanna's mother, Kaylin, died in December 2022, but up until she died, Kaylin believed that Leanna was still alive. After getting lost on a road, a single mother disappeared. Her car was found on a country road the next day. What happened to Karen Denise Wells? Background. Karen Denise Wells was born September 22, 1970 in Oklahoma. Her father and mother divorced, and she spent some time living with her father in South Dakota before moving in with her mother in her hometown of Haskell, Oklahoma, after getting pregnant with a son in 1992. Her mother reported that she was excited to be raising a child, embraced being a single mother, and wanted to raise her son in her hometown. Wells preferred to go by her middle name, Denise. Disappearance. In April 1994, Wells decided to take a road trip to Bergen, New Jersey, to visit a childhood friend named Melissa Shepard. On April 10th, she dropped her 14-month-old son off at her mother's house, telling her she was visiting a friend who grew up in Haskell and would be back in 4 days. Her family was not worried about the length of the drive because Wells was apparently used to driving long distances. The reason for the trip is vague, though some sources say Wells was helping Shepard with some trouble. After dropping off her son, Wells rented a white Plymouth Acclaim in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She apparently made good time, reaching Carlisle, Pennsylvania, nearly 1,200 miles from Tulsa and about 3 hours from her destination on April 12th. However, detectives later determined that Wells had driven as far east as Schaeffersontown and Burnville, Pennsylvania, only 90 minutes from New Jersey, but then backtracked in the wrong direction to Carlisle. Interestingly, someone from Schaefersville town had called Melissa Shepard on April 11th, the day before Wells reached that area. Shepard eventually stopped cooperating with the police, and this call remains unexplained. At about 7 p.m. on April 12th, Wells checked into the Pike Motel in Carlisle, and around 7:30 p.m. called her friend Shepard, who described Wells as exhausted. Wells said she couldn't drive any further that night, and Shepard agreed to meet Wells at the motel, saying she'd be there by midnight. She also said she was going to McDonald's for dinner, and then was going to sleep until Shepard arrived. At around 8 p.m., Wells left her room and asked the motel clerk for directions to McDonald's. This was her last confirmed sighting. Melissa Shepard arrived at the Pike Motel at around midnight. When Wells didn't answer the door, Shepard entered the room and found Wells's belongings and room key. The bed was not slept in. There was no sign of struggle. Shepard immediately filed a missing persons report with the local police, telling them that Wells had been awake for 48 hours and that something may have happened to her when she went out for food. Police doubted foul play, but put out an all-points bulletin on the missing rental car. At 5:30 a.m. the following morning, passing motorists discovered Wells's rental car stopped in the middle of the westbound lane of Route 274 near Germantown, Pennsylvania, about 35 miles from her motel. This was a chilling scene. Both front doors were standing open, suggesting that there had been two people in the car. The battery was dead, and the car was out of gas. There were French fries, trash from a Hardee's restaurant, shoes, maps, and empty soda bottles in the car. Some sources say there was also a small amount of marijuana, although it is not known that this belonged to Wells. Investigators could not determine if she had made it to McDonald's. Wells's change purse was found in a ditch nearby. Despite being found in the middle of a paved road, the car was muddy and scratched, as if it had been driven off-road. Denise's route. The odometer on the rental car showed it had gone 1,900 miles since leaving Tulsa, significantly more than expected. Most articles I've read on this case frame Wells's backtracking to Carlisle as strange or inexplicable, but I disagree. Schaeferstown isn't far from I-76, aka the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and although Carlisle is about an hour west of Schaeferstown on I-76, and Wells would have passed through it earlier that day, Carlisle is near the junction of I-78 and I-76. I-78 goes to Wells's destination and I-76 does not. This is my own speculation, but I think she may have simply taken a wrong turn at Carlisle, realized and then turned around. The real mystery, to me, is why she stopped in Schaeferstown, specifically, since it is about 8 minutes off the turnpike and there are plenty of closer towns to turn around in. Additionally, if she reached Burnville as reported, she was very close to I-78 and shouldn't have had to turn around. Police have speculated that someone could have given Wells wrong directions intentionally, but there is no proof of this. Regardless, it is important to note that this turnaround only added about 120 miles to her trip. It is about 30 miles from Carlisle to the approximate area where Wells's car was found. Taking all of this into account, the car's odometer still registered roughly 500 extra miles than Wells is known to have driven since leaving Tulsa. It is not clear if Wells had to backtrack prior to reaching Pennsylvania. Investigation. Police immediately began searching the area where the car was found, which was near a state forest and contained many secluded cabins. There was no evidence Denise fled to the woods and nothing was found. When notified, Wells's mother immediately suspected foul play. There seemed to be very few developments after the car was found. In 2008, some cigarette butts and paper cups from the car were sent out for DNA testing. Additional items were sent out in September 2020. I have found no updates on the DNA testing since that time. Final thoughts. Denise Wells' disappearance is still an open case, and the FBI is still seeking tips, anonymous or otherwise. Pennsylvania State Police can be reached at 717-249-2121 for leading tips. Her family seems to have accepted something terrible happened to Wells. In 2018, her mother told the press that she believes her daughter is dead, but she is grateful that police are still trying to solve her case. She gave the following quote in 2020 to Local 21 News. Quote, "Denise was my angel, and for 26 years, we've missed her. We've missed not watching her grow into her role as a mother or raising our grandchild. We're thankful investigators have kept her case alive, and we're hoping, as we always have, for answers." End quote. Wells' son, 14 months old at the time of her disappearance, would now be 31. This case leaves a lot open to speculation, and the facts can be difficult to pin down. Most investigators believe that foul play was involved. It was recent enough that anyone involved is likely still alive. Melissa Shepard stopped cooperating with the police sometime after reporting Wells missing, and her current whereabouts are unknown. The phone call to Shepard from Shafersville on April 11th remains unexplained. Wells was 5 foot 6 inches with blonde hair and blue-green eyes, and was 23 years old at the time of her disappearance. She had a 1/4-inch scar on her forearm and wore prescription glasses. An elderly man was found dead in a public bathroom after committing suicide. Can a mobility device be used as a key in identifying him? Washoe County, John Doe, 2021. On the 27th of March, 2021, a body of an elderly man was found in a bathroom of the Dick Taylor Memorial Park. The man was dead due to a suicide by hanging. He was found only a few hours after death. NAMA states 830 hours, but that's almost certainly a misspelling given that the body was found in pretty good condition. He could have been there for longer than a day or two, I assume. Which meant that any decomposition processes didn't start yet. Oddly enough, we don't have a lot of details about how he looked. He was an older adult, likely somewhere between 50 and 70 years of age. He was 5 foot 9 inches and weighed 129 pounds. His hair was gray or graying, and his eyes were brown. He was wearing a white Fruit of the Loom t-shirt, size large, 2 white mid-calf socks, slip-on gray Skechers brand sneakers, size 9.5, black sweatpants with gray stripes down the sides, size extra large, with a tear on the back upper hip, and also a pair of blue sweatpants of the same brand and with the same stripes, only they were blue and size medium. They even had a tear in the exact same spot. The man didn't have an ID or any other document and seemingly didn't leave a suicide note. The only other clue to his identity that we have, and one that drew me to this case, was the fact that he seemingly used a walker, a type of frame on wheels you can lean on and support some of your weight and walk easier. From what I can gather, the Dick Taylor Memorial Park this man was found in is a fairly large local park with a playground, picnic shelters, and multiple sport courts and spaces. To me, this walker likely implies that this man was a local. We don't know about why exactly he was using that walker. It's not on NAMUS or anything. But using a walker clearly implies that he had issues with moving around. Depending on what type of disability he had, he likely couldn't walk long distances or possibly drive. If he drove there with a car, then someone had to notice an abandoned car in a parking lot after some time. A person in the park told police that he might have got there by cab, which I guess is possible. And I feel like a cab driver would remember driving an older man with a walker to Dick Taylor Memorial Park. They just need to be found. Maybe someone who was there on that day saw him and remembers him. I think that I would remember seeing someone using a walker if I were in a park. Maybe a neighbor or a store clerk remembers seeing him and wonder where he's gone. I wonder why he was wearing 2 pairs of nearly identical pants. Are there any people with possible similar disabilities that know what that could be? Are they easier to put on or keep the wearer warm if the legs lose muscle or the circulation worsens? I feel like this case is very solvable, and it just takes the right person seeing his face and knowing that he used a walker. I feel like he might have been estranged from his family or leads a lonely life, as a lot of older disabled folks do, for different reasons, more or less voluntary. Again, due to his disability, I feel like he was fairly local, which narrows down the area of where to look for missing people. The fact that he committed suicide makes the case really depressing, and it stands out. I know that we will never know, but why did he do it? Was he lonely or isolated, or was his disability too much of a burden on him? Why did he pick such a specific spot? Was it important to him in any way? If you believe that you have any info that can help with identifying John Doe, call the Washoe County Regional Medical Examiner's Office at 775-785-6114. Agency case number 2021-01480. And that, dear listeners, is the end of these Unsolved Mysteries Volume 3. My heart goes out to all the friends and family and the victims in these cases. If, for any reason, you do know the whereabouts or know anything about anyone mentioned in these cases, please contact the local authorities. With that being said, if you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you kindly. If you are awake and listening, I hope you have enjoyed these stories. Until next time, I'll read to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good